Gonna move on to our next presenter, is Andy Click. So Andy has been, is my mic working? Okay. Andy has been an instructional technologist with NC State for over 5 years and recently joined the educational support team at the vet school. His primary focus has been on distance education and the successful use of technology to reach a variety of students with a wide array of motivations and challenges to their learning experience. So Andy, when you're ready, please go ahead.
All right, going to be talking, kind of following up nicely, I think, actually, on where Michael was, and talking about once you've got faculty encouraged and deigning to adopt new technology, the best way to actually get them to understand it within those various training types that you're dealing with. Basically, talking tech to teachers and whatnot. I'll go ahead and skip the intro because Rob was nice enough to cover that for me. One of the biggest challenges, honestly, with teaching teachers is that they're not used to being on the other side of the lectern. So we'll talk about some of the challenges with teachers as students and how you can get around a lot of those challenges with very specific guidance on your tone and different techniques to try during your trainings. And then also talking about managing multiple media so that you're not just putting all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So when I first started teaching to teachers, as a son of a teacher myself, I was really hopeful that of all people to be students, teachers would understand, they would get the importance of education, they would get the importance of being respectful to the educator and things of that nature. So I expected them to be so eager and positive and ready to go, and what I've found out is that that's not at all the case. When it comes to teaching teachers, in much the same way that many of us as support personnel are terrible customers when we call others support, teachers can also make some of the worst students. Some of the behaviors you can expect a lot of times from them, a lot of multitasking, obviously they have a lot going on just like we do, and so you'll often find them a little bit distracted, kind of giving a little bit of half-hearted engagement. At the same time, kind of the flip side of that, some of them will have avid questions, be constantly giving interruptions, wanting to know more and get more clarity on specific things and specific applications of the things that you're talking about, which can be a little bit disruptive to the flow of a training or a workshop. And then, as Michael talked about, the time is a big thing. A lot of folks will have other commitments. They may have to leave early, and then scheduling and things like that can obviously be somewhat difficult, so you may have lower attendance at sometimes versus others. Really the biggest thing is it's very important to treat instructors as adult learners, which obviously they are. But adult learners come to education with a very different mindset, a very different perspective from the conventional students that we usually are targeting. Adult learners are typically all about the outcomes. They want to know about the applications. They want to know about what you're teaching them is going to give them in concrete and real results that they can apply to their specific situation. So always keep that in mind when you're doing training and whatnot for faculty. Just remember that outcomes is what they're looking for. They're looking for specific takeaways and things like that right off the bat. In addition to that complication, faculty are used to being pillars of knowledge in the community. They're used to being respected as subject matter experts. And when they switch over into technology with which they're unfamiliar or which they're new to, it's a very far way to fall, pardon me, for many of them. And it can be a little bit difficult for them to get past that kind of blunt to their pride. So be sure to respect that knowledge and that status. Even if this is not their area of expertise in technology, they do have an area of expertise, and they're used to knowing what's going on, so this is definitely a bit of a far fall for them. They also know the tricks of the trade, which means that as you're teaching faculty, they're often analyzing your teaching method as it happens. Many of them may not even be conscious that they're doing it, but it means that you have to also be aware of the fact that if you start using conventional activities and elements of instruction, they're aware of how those work, they're aware of what they address, and that can sometimes lead to a bit of a challenge, as they're going to be putting you under a lot of scrutiny as you're in the act of teaching. So biggest things on that, start with your takeaways. Right off the bat, let your faculty know how they're going to be able to apply what you're teaching them, the outcomes of the workshop right off the start, so they know that there's something worthwhile to pay attention for and be involved in. Definitely respect their experience, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then utilize that self-awareness. As I mentioned, they know what's going on with teaching. They know how teaching works. Make use of that. Don't try to teach them kind of coming in from the side. You can move into higher orders of activities and whatnot because you can expect that they have an understanding of how the basics of a lot of these things work. Leverage their existing knowledge to give yourself a little bit of a leg up. Some of the best things, we talked about multitasking before. I find a lot of times in the workshops that faculty who are multitasking, it's because they're already caught up. they know what you're talking about, they have an understanding of the subject at hand, and so they're using that extra time while everyone else in the class gets caught up to where they are to check their email or their smartphone or things like that. In those cases, crowdsource. Use the actual attendees in your class who are already caught up, get them to help you assist their peers who are not caught up yet or having other technical problems. Get them to basically help each other laterally. This also leads back to what Michael was referring to as the faculty champions. You've got a number of folks, you probably start to learn who they are the more trainings you do, who are going to be the ones who are constantly on task, and then they're the ones who are going to be constantly behind or a little bit confused. As much as possible, pair those folks up. Get them to help one another out, and that way everyone will be on the same page, and those who are then teaching others within the same class and getting them caught up have a second chance to really take away and retain what it is that you're working on. Obviously plan for pauses. Get used to the fact that you're going to have to make sure that everyone's caught up and on the same page because you're dealing with that kind of disparate timing. And just make sure that you've got engaging activities. This can be difficult in shorter workshops like what we're talking about today, obviously. But anytime that you have a good bit of time, whether it's an hour and a half or whatnot, try and put in at least a little bit of active learning or group-based learning in there to get them broken up a little bit so they have another chance to get engaged and get questions answered on a lateral basis they might not be asking you directly. Speaking of those questions and interruptions, whenever possible, give yourself a topic sideboard. If folks are starting to ask questions in the middle of things, jot down that question, let them know that you'll get to it either at the end or when it's when that part of the instruction has come up in your outline. In a physical classroom, if you've got a whiteboard that you can write it down on, just jot down real quick that question on the whiteboard. That helps immensely that they don't feel like you're shelving their question. They're putting it right there. They know that they can keep you honest if you skip past it later, and they don't have to remember it to ask you at the very end of the presentation. It's there. They don't have to think about it anymore, and you'll be able to get to it when it's appropriate time. Get yourself a rover, someone to help walk through the classroom at the time that you're teaching to help with technical problems so that you can focus on topical issues and things of that nature. And stay on target as much as possible. It's very easy, especially if you start answering questions midstream, to kind of go down a rabbit hole. One question leads to another question leads to another, and before you know it, you've wasted 15 minutes on something that isn't related, and it can be difficult to get back to where you were and pick up, especially for anybody who might have been left behind in that discussion. Once you get about 2 questions deep, just let people know. We'll talk about it more after class and kind of postpone that to make sure that you get the core instruction to everyone in the classroom. And then for folks who are having to leave early or whose timing doesn't quite line up, make sure as much as possible that you record your workshops like we're doing today. That capture is invaluable. It'll help folks, not only those who are not able to make it for the whole thing, but those who were and still want to review it to really kind of grind those concepts in later to look back over it. Front load your crucial content as much as possible. Make sure that the most key elements are right at the start of a section or right at the start of a workshop so that folks can get those first, and then if they have to leave and whatnot, it's not too much of a problem. And also, don't take it personally. They're not leaving because you're uninteresting. They're leaving because they have a lot of time commitments, other meetings, research, classes and whatnot that they have to get to. So don't hold that against them. They're not holding it against you. It's just a time crunch issue. And so don't let it rattle you if someone has to get up in the middle of a workshop and walk out. Tone is a big thing when it comes to actually reaching faculty in a very positive way, and a lot of that comes back to respect. Leverage what they already know. We talked about how they often see themselves as pillars of knowledge. They are subject matter experts. Use that as much as possible in the classroom. Rather than trying to constantly tell your instructors how to teach, get their input on how they teach in their classrooms, ask them their challenges that they deal with, and things of that nature. So try and get that input so that they'll have that feedback in the classroom. It has a lending and a feeling of importance in the middle of things. Use examples as often as possible and make them relevant. This is another adult learner trick. Rather than dealing with hypotheticals, deal with very specific things. And rather than reinventing the wheel, because we're not subject matter experts in their subjects, borrow from their peers. Talk to them and say, hey, do you have an example question or example case that I might be able to use for an upcoming workshop? That input becomes very, very valuable to them, and because it's made from their peers, they know that it's something very possible for them to be able to put together. Find out what matters to them. Be the Lord of all you survey. Poll them again, get their input, find out what topics they'd like to know about. There are always going to be workshops and trainings that you give them that you know are going to be necessary. but also find out from them what they're interested in. They may surprise you in some of the breadth they might come with in terms of their interests. And then respect their time. We talked about that a lot. The time is the big issue, especially for workshops. You're often going to find yourself starting late to allow stragglers to get in and get caught up, and you have those pauses that we talked about. Always try to end on time. That means having a buffer. Figure out how long you think the workshop's going to take and then tack on 30 more minutes. And that's after you've added allowing time for questions, because it almost always ends up taking longer than you think it's going to. I've almost never, in fact never, had someone complain about a workshop ending early. It was much, much better that you have ample time to get things done, have plenty of time for questions and discussion, and still end on time. When we talk about learning styles, something that we're all probably familiar with, it applies to adult learners as well, obviously. We talk about these 5 major areas of how to reach as many different learners as possible. This absolutely applies to faculty as well. Whenever you can, get as many of these for every training as you can. So you're going to be having a lot of duplication of effort, recordings, written instructions, demos, practice sites, and also one-on-one support. Some of the specific tools that we'll get into that I've used at least, and this doesn't even really begin to chip the iceberg, but it'll be a good starting point for those of you who are looking for other tools to go into. Like we're using right now, I actually use quite a bit of Google Docs for trainings. It's great for content hosting for workshop handouts and text tutorials. It also has Google Forms, which is a nice free survey tool that you can use to drum up additional support for workshops, find out what topics they're interested in, or let faculty evaluate you after a workshop so you can get input on what you could do better. Jing is a free service from TechSmith, which will allow you to record up to 5 minutes of video with a screen capture. Very simple and easy to use, and because it's only 5 minutes long, you don't have to worry about going way over time. Usually you're only going to get about 3 minutes of interest before someone has gone on to do something else. So great for capturing short tutorials, task-based things that you can give to people outside of the workshop that, just as Michael said, they'll use it when they need it. That's exactly the sort of thing that you can record very easily and host. Similar to YouTube, great for hosting. There are plenty of free video editing softwares out there. If you're on a Mac, iMovie. If you're on Windows, you can download Windows Live Movie Maker for free. They're both fairly robust. Camtasia Relay, not free, but it is a fairly valuable thing that we've used a lot of for screen capture, and it works as kind of a switchboard to post to any of a variety of topics or media hosting solutions. If you're doing one-on-one support assistance and you can't get to physically where they are, or it's just inconvenient to, Skype, Google Hangouts, both free, fairly easy to use. Google Hangouts now has application sharing, which makes it great for distance support. And there's also Windows Remote Assistance. To skip by in the interest of time here on this part. We talked about, I really wish I had Michael's turtle-on-turtle picture for this, because it's pretty much perfect. As often as possible, save yourself the work. Your time is just as valuable, and we, as tech support people, don't have an infinite amount of it, so save yourself as much time as you can. When you're hosting a workshop, also record that workshop. You can then use video editing to carve that up into smaller, digestible video tutorials. If you script your workshops, and you should be because you need those as transcripts for the recording, those can also then become a basis for your written handouts. Those handouts then can be carved up into text solutions, sets of steps. Any activities that you do in the workshop, if you have a sandbox space that you can set up, use those activities as a basis so that faculty can go in and practice on their own. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use the work that you're already doing to avoid duplicating that effort. Last couple things, this will be sent out. There's just a quick little article by Amy Beavers that does a wonderful breakdown of what teachers are as learners, and of course EDUCAUSE is wonderful, has their own YouTube channel for lots and lots of topics and techniques. All right, with that we've got about a minute left. Any questions from you guys? All right, looks like that's it. Thank you guys very much.